History is often treated as a record of what happened. Names, dates, places, preserved, studied, repeated. But the record is not complete. Even at scale, it can fail, not just in small details, but in something harder to account for. Groups of people, large enough to matter, that are known to have existed, known to have moved, and yet not fully accounted for afterward. Armies, legions, fleets, not lost in myth, but left without a clear ending. A royal force was sent into the desert and was never clearly accounted for again. In the late 6th century BCE, Cambyses II had already secured control over Egypt. The conquest, around 525 BCE, brought the region into the Achaemenid Empire and extended Persian authority deep into North Africa. From that position, according to Herodotus, a new expedition was ordered. Its destination was the Oracle of Amun at Siwa Oasis, a religious center located far to the west, isolated within the western desert. Reaching it required crossing hundreds of kilometers of arid terrain, with no permanent settlements along much of the route. Herodotus describes the force as numbering 50,000 men. The figure cannot be independently verified, but it indicates the scale of the operation. A large formation moving beyond the Nile Valley and into an environment where survival depended on planning, supply, and precise navigation. Such a movement would not have followed a fixed road. Travel across the western desert relied on knowledge of wells, seasonal conditions, and direction over open ground where landmarks are limited. Without consistent access to water, even a well-organized force could become vulnerable within days. From this point, the record narrows. There are no surviving Persian accounts describing the progress of the expedition. Egyptian sources do not confirm its arrival. The version that remains comes from Herodotus, writing decades later, based on reports available to him. In his account, the army marched for several days before being overtaken by a powerful sandstorm and destroyed. That description has been widely repeated, but it is not confirmed. No site has been securely identified as the location of the force. No mass burial has been linked to it. Searches in the western desert have produced findings, bones, fragments, scattered artifacts, but none have been accepted as definitive evidence of the army described by Herodotus. The conditions of the region offer one explanation for that absence. Wind continually reshapes the desert surface, covering and exposing material over time. Tracks do not remain. Positions shift. Even large groups can leave limited recoverable evidence if they fail in such an environment. But environmental loss is not the only possibility. Some researchers have proposed that the army may have been intercepted before reaching its destination, defeated by forces aligned with a local Egyptian ruler, and later described differently in the historical record. This interpretation remains a theory, not a consensus, but it reflects the uncertainty surrounding the event. There is also the question of transmission. Herodotus preserves the story, but his account depends on information gathered after the fact, shaped by distance, retelling, and interpretation. What survives in writing may not reflect the full sequence of events. What can be established is limited. An expedition is described, a destination is known, a large force is said to have been sent. What cannot be established is its verified outcome. No confirmed endpoint, no agreed location, no independent record. The movement into the desert is preserved. What happened within it is not. If the desert can erase an army, what happens when the disappearance doesn't happen in silence, but inside an empire built on records? Rome recorded extensively, but one of its legions becomes increasingly difficult to trace. Legio IX Hispana was not a temporary force. A Roman legion was a permanent military unit, typically composed of several thousand soldiers, organized, supplied, and integrated into the structure of the empire. It built forts, secured territory, and remained in service for decades. Its existence and movements can be traced through inscriptions, military organization, and administrative records preserved across the regions where it operated. This is how the 9th Legion can be followed. By the late 1st century CE, it was stationed in Roman Britain, a province that required constant military presence. Expansion into the north brought sustained resistance, and control depended on legions positioned along the frontier. At sites such as Eboracum, modern York, the legion is clearly attested. Its name appears in stone inscriptions left by soldiers and officers. These inscriptions are not narrative accounts, but they serve a precise function. They record units, locations, and activity. Through them, the presence of the Legion can be fixed in place. For a time, that record remains continuous. Then it begins to break. After the early 2nd century CE, the evidence in Britain no longer provides a clear continuation of the Legion's activity. But the absence in Britain does not mark its end. Inscriptions found at Nijmegen, in the region of the Lower Rhine, indicate that elements of the Legion or the Legion itself were present on the continent after its time in Britain, likely in the early 2nd century CE. These traces extend the timeline. They show movement, not disappearance. The Legion was not simply lost in Britain, it was redeployed. From there, the record becomes less complete. There is no surviving Roman account describing a final campaign involving the 9th Legion. No inscription that identifies its destruction. No administrative record that clearly marks its dissolution. The same system that allows the Legion to be traced across decades no longer provides a continuous line. Instead, the evidence becomes fragmented over time. Clear presence in Britain in the late 1st century. Indications of redeployment to the continent in the early 2nd. Then, no agreed endpoint in the record that survives. Several explanations remain possible within that gap. The Legion may have been transferred again to another frontier and lost in a campaign that is not preserved in surviving sources. It may have been reorganized or absorbed into another unit as part of structural changes within the Roman army. Or its disappearance may reflect the limits of what has survived, rather than a single defining event. What can be traced is substantial. What cannot be traced is its conclusion. The 9th Legion does not vanish in one moment. It moves through the record, becomes partial and then uncertain, a documented force without a documented end. And if even Rome can leave the fate of a legion uncertain, losses at sea become harder to follow still, especially when they belong not to a single unit, but to an entire system. Before the rise of classical Greece, one civilization dominated the sea and then began to lose that presence. The Minoan civilization developed across the island of Crete and surrounding regions over the 3rd and 2nd millennia BCE. Its position in the Aegean placed it at the center of maritime movement, and its influence extended through trade, contact, and control of sea routes linking the Eastern Mediterranean. That influence is not preserved in written naval records, but it can be reconstructed through material evidence. Ports, coastal settlements, and artistic depictions of ships all point to a system built on movement across the sea. By the 2nd millennium BCE, this system connected multiple regions, forming a network rather than a single route. Around the mid-2nd millennium BCE, that system was disrupted. The eruption of Thera, one of the largest in the Bronze Age, produced ash fallout across the Aegean and generated tsunamis that reached surrounding coastlines. At Akrotiri, the effects of the eruption are preserved in detail, with structures buried and abandoned. Beyond Santorini, the impact is less direct but still visible. Geological evidence indicates that tsunami activity affected parts of Crete and nearby coasts. In a maritime system dependent on harbors, ships, and coastal infrastructure, such disruption would not have been limited to a single location. Ports could be damaged, ships near shore could be lost, routes could become unstable. That system depended not only on ships, but on consistency, known routes, functioning ports, and predictable movement between them. When coastal infrastructure is disrupted, even temporarily, coordination becomes more difficult. Movement slows. Routes become less reliable. There is no surviving record that describes a fleet being destroyed. No list of ships. No account of a single event marking the end of Minoan naval activity. Instead, what can be observed is a change over time. After the eruption, the system that supported Minoan maritime presence appears to weaken. Trade networks show signs of disruption. Control over sea routes becomes less clear. Over the following centuries, influence in the region shifts, and Mycenaean presence becomes more prominent across areas previously associated with Minoan activity. The timeline matters. The gap between the eruption and the loss of clear dominance suggests a process, not a single event. The change unfolds over decades, possibly longer. What begins as environmental disruption becomes part of a broader transformation in the balance of power across the Aegean. The maritime presence that once defined the Minoans does not end in a single recorded moment. It becomes less visible, less certain, and eventually harder to trace as a dominant system. What remains is not a documented loss of a fleet, but a loss of clear continuity. A maritime network disrupted, a system weakened, a presence no longer clearly accounted for. Across these cases, the pattern is not what is known, but what is missing. An army without a verified end, a legion without a final record, a maritime system that fades instead of collapsing. The scale is clear, the outcome is not. History preserves presence, movement, structure, influence, but it does not always preserve conclusions, and in those gaps, what remains is not absence, but a record that was never complete.